giant dinosaurs, and nuclear Armageddon. Name a more iconic duo. I'll wait. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Yes, Godzilla over the years has had quite a lot of different abilities, not just for combat-related things, everything from his telepathy to his extremely potent regenerative capabilities. But that is not what we are talking about today. If the last video we did on this kind of subject, Godzilla's most bizarre abilities, was his passive abilities and toolkit, these are his strictly attack-oriented abilities. Since we've already made a video covering the atomic ray in depth, we are not going to be covering that specifically, as again, the entire video goes over that entirely in depth, and we're going to be sticking to his more lesser known offensive tools. Hi everyone, I am your American Allosaurus, Max Allo, and if you guys enjoy all the colossal kaiju content, don't forget to subscribe for more, leave a like on the video, comment which of Godzilla's abilities and attacks are your favorite, and let us know what you'd like to see us make a video on. A sort of derivation of his atomic ray is Godzilla's nuclear pulse. This is something that the original Showa-era Godzilla never really displayed and was much more prominently shown in the Heisei-era films, though other Godzillas have demonstrated this ability as well, most notably Monsterverse Godzilla and Godzilla 2000 to a more limited degree. This nuclear pulse or atomic pulse, they work interchangeably, was first demonstrated in his battle against Biollante, utilized to destroy all of the tentacles that Biollante was trying to wrap around and ensnare him with. Though it is relatively short range, it covers every direction around him. It is, of course, an omnidirectional nuclear pulse, capable of knocking back even foes as massive and powerful as King Ghidorah. It functions a lot in his toolkit as somewhat of a utility tool, to break free from enemies either swarming from all directions or some sort of entrapment, as well as when Mothra utilized her dust and reflective scales to deflect and counter Godzilla's atomic ray. This was no match for the atomic pulse, shattering her 3D mirror attack and knocking her very far away. In Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, this was actually amped up to a far greater degree by absorbing Fire Rodan's energy after his sacrifice. The heat of this was so intense, it melted the synthetic diamond armor off of Mechagodzilla 2. This completely disabled the fact that the entire reason why Mechagodzilla 2 was constructed the way it was is to utilize the plasma grenade to reflect Godzilla's atomic ray back at him. With this armored coating completely vaporized and melted away, Mechagodzilla was helpless against the empowered heat ray. And when facing down Destroya, or the many miniature Destroyas, at the end of his life, due to the critical nuclear meltdown he was undergoing, this nuclear pulse was greatly enhanced. They were somewhat ineffective against the Super X3, but they were incredibly lethal to Destroya of all things. The reason being the sheer heat caused a destabilization of Destroya's body. When he was being swarmed by the miniature Destroyas, this vaporized all of them in a much greater proximity than the nuclear pulse normally has, suggesting that its concussive force, while relatively short range, the heat extends far beyond this. However, in this instance, this was not something Godzilla deliberately used. It was something of an automatic biological response, and was a symptom of Godzilla's nuclear meltdown, as we see later in the movie when his dorsal spines begin to melt, and he begins radiating heat out of those dorsal spines. It's due to his nuclear reactor going out of control, and the radiation is leaking out of his body, suggesting that this is something that Godzilla can sort of manually overclock his internal nuclear reactor to amp up the radiation to initiate this pulse. As in most cases, there is something of a wind-up time before it can be used, unlike the atomic ray, further suggesting that despite the fact that it doesn't cause as much visible damage to opponents, because of course the entire impact is spread over the course of their entire body by the omnidirectional nature of the attack, it is actually more powerful than the atomic ray. With Godzilla 2000, he brought back the atomic pulse, though this was actually in a slightly changed form. This one has a much more fiery version to its attack. Godzilla's dorsal spines start glowing, and much like previously, it does seem to have a much longer wind-up time. This, because of its amped up power nature, is actually used to lethal effect to destroy Orga, just obliterating the top half of his body. as well as causing Godzilla to emit a large volume of heat. Monsterverse Godzilla actually demonstrates his ability twice. He utilized it 2 times in rapid succession against King Ghidorah at the end of Godzilla King of the Monsters, utilizing the intense heat and concussive force to vaporize and burn off King Ghidorah's wings, and the 2 heads, Kevin and San. Kevin and Nee, no, San is also Kevin. This one's also unique in that the first pattern of the atomic pulse shows that it actually has Mothra's wings in it, suggesting that this version is actually inherited from Mothra, as is a variation of Mothra's God Ray's abilities, which is a similar bioluminescent pulse she can emit, which is actually something that she uses to destroy King Ghidorah's superstorm over Castle Bravo earlier on in the movie. The next time we see this ability is in Godzilla Kong the New Empire, having not used it at all in Godzilla vs. Kong, despite the fact that it would have been very helpful, to get rid of all the little drones that are attacking him after he devours the nuclear reactor in France. This is used much like the original atomic pulse utilized by Heisei Godzilla to simply get off things that are annoying him. Godzilla's next and debatably most iconic capability is actually his sheer brute force. Godzilla's strikes are greatly enhanced by his natural physique, delivering megaton punches and claw slashes while giving him actually quite incredible dexterity and much finer movements. Many of Godzilla's fighting styles, especially in the earlier films, are actually inspired by various martial arts, allowing him to lift up and throw monsters even larger than him, lifting up and slamming both King Ghidorah and Hedorah down, and even in Godzilla Final Wars, showing the ability to throw very high into the air Kaiser Ghidorah, who outweighs him by a great margin. Claw slashes alone are capable of penetrating the heavily armored scaling on a Destroyer, leaving a deep gash causing him to spurt out blood, as well as being strong enough to choke out Fire Rodan. Monsterverse Godzilla displays similar amounts of strength, able to easily shove around massive monsters like King Ghidorah, the female Muto, and manhandle and throw King Kong around with just his jaws alone. Even when Godzilla was holding back fighting against Kong, as we're actually going to be covering in a later video, Godzilla through most of his fights against Kong did hold back, and a held back claw swipe is capable of knocking Kong down with ease, as well as physically overpowering the much larger Shimo. While it is a simple ability, it is nonetheless radically impressive and the base foundation of Godzilla's entire offensive toolkit. Only Heisei Godzilla has actually demonstrated a further enhancement of this. In Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, he demonstrates a sort of energy-enhanced version of these strikes. Frequently, I will use Wikizilla to sort of supplement making sure I nail every single instance of an ability and just double-checking, and this is one thing I actually noticed they didn't have on Heisei Godzilla's page. You'll notice when he is slashing at Space Godzilla, there's sort of this sort of blue energy pulse electricity that comes out. We see Space Godzilla actually having a sort of a similar version of this when attacking, and though we don't see this in other movies, it shows that Godzilla is capable of harnessing his abilities to enhance his strikes. Or at the very least, Heisei Godzilla did demonstrate this. Godzilla also displays this ability when biting down onto Space Godzilla's shoulder, that this electricity arcs throughout his entire body and his dorsal spines light up. It's commented that this is also stopping Space Godzilla from absorbing energy, suggesting that not only is it some sort of empowered strike attack, it's also some sort of energy inhibition attack that locks out the abilities of the target. And with Godzilla's own dorsal spines lighting up in the exact same manner that they light up when he uses Atomic Ray, suggests that it could be some sort of variation of it in the same way that the Atomic Pulse is. Once again, neither of these are things that are noted on Wikizilla, so anyone there sees this, no one add it. Though we don't actually see Godzilla utilizing electrical enhanced attacks in other films, we do see, at least in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, which is a precursor to Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, that Godzilla is able to redirect the flow of electricity from the shock anchors Mechagodzilla 2 uses, showing that perhaps Godzilla does actually have some sort of electrical conductivity properties and manipulation of electricity. Godzilla Earth demonstrated multiple different ways of utilizing his atomic energy, obviously utilizing the atomic ray, but another is the plasma cutter. By simply swinging his tail, this creates a crescent-shaped wave of energy that just obliterates everything in his path. There really isn't much to say about this because we don't really get to see it used too much, mostly as Godzilla Earth is never really shown in combat against many other monsters, but the fact that it can level and destroy mountains is honestly quite terrifying. Now, this last one may be slightly a little bit cheating, and that is the ability to assimilate and redirect various energy-based attacks. We see in many of the different movies, Godzilla receives energy enhancements and power-ups by fighting other things. Godzilla vs. Space Godzilla, he absorbs Space Godzilla's cosmic eldritch energy and using it against him to vaporize him with the nuclear fusion ray. Monsterverse Godzilla absorbing Mothra's power to enhance and generate the atomic nuclear pulse used to vaporize King Ghidorah. But all of these are contingent on the utilization of another monster or some sort of other outside external source to enhance and power up his abilities. Often in the form of an ally, but actually one time in the form of an enemy. In GMK, Godzilla Mothra King Ghidorah Giant Monster All-Out Attack, Godzilla was able to redirect and incorporate King Ghidorah's gravity beams into his own atomic ray, creating the gravitational atomic ray, something that greatly enhanced the atomic ray's capability to blast apart King Ghidorah's body. The previous atomic ray was shown to be quite powerful and actually put down King Ghidorah, though it did not really destroy Ghidorah's body, leaving it intact enough for Mothra to resurrect. The gravitational atomic ray blasted King Ghidorah into giant meaty chunks. Now it is worth noting, most of the time Godzilla has been able to receive these power bonuses, it is because the energy is absorbed in through his dorsal spines. We see the same thing happen with the Gotengo, firing that energy beam into Godzilla's dorsal spines to power him up to overpower Kaiser Ghidorah. When Rodan sacrifices himself to give Godzilla energy, we see he lays on Godzilla's back, right next to Godzilla's dorsal spines. King of the Monsters, Godzilla is laying down when he absorbs Mothra's energy, which did cover his entire body, but also his dorsal spines. And GMK, we see the electricity from the gravity beams gathering specifically around those dorsal platings, suggesting that Godzilla can essentially use them as lightning rods for various forms of energy. Again, kind of slightly cheating because it's not really an inherent power of Godzilla that he can use offensively, but simply sort of an attack reflector. But, I mean, I guess it's a defense used for offense, so I guess it counts. But that is really going to be all for today. Despite all of Godzilla's abilities, most of them are more passive buffs that he has going for him. Everything from his telepathy to his regeneration, to his nuclear power absorption, which actually likely this assimilation of other powers and redirection is simply a derivation further of. When you break it down, Godzilla's attacks are generally fairly straightforward. There are a few little oddities here and there, but Godzilla is often able to make the best usage of them through his very clever and inventive battling tactics, pressuring opponents, understanding their weaknesses, and countering them. Were there any sort of special attacks or powers of Godzilla that he uses strictly offensively that I missed? Because I'm willing to bet there was probably one that I may have missed, or at least one or two. And, we're not perfect here, but, let me know. I'd be happy to hear. Next week, I don't actually know what we're going to be doing yet. But I know it's going to be great. We actually got a lot of ideas for videos. Actually, probably the next like 2-3 months, I've already got ideas for everything mapped out. It's just the process of, recording, editing, and putting them together is kind of the thing. Regardless, I've been Max Allo, your American Allosaurus. Long live the Kaiju King.